Hi, and welcome to a different type of video. If you're new here, my name is Elise. I'm the founder of Post Stroke, a 501c3 nonprofit here in the United States. I also hold a clinical doctorate in occupational therapy, and I am a certified stroke rehab specialist. I'm really excited to share a conversation with you today with, first and foremost, my friend, Clive Kempson, but also the board president of Post Stroke. He is also a stroke survivor and a lived experience expert for Monash University and Monash Health System, University of Sydney, and the Australian Orthotic Prosthetic Association. He's also been a lived experience investigator on multiple grants for stroke rehab research, has been a presenter and speaker at multiple stroke-specific conferences. He was a finalist for the Stroke Foundation's 2021 Award for Improving Life After Stroke, and he provides his lived experience perspective to allied health students at multiple universities in Australia. So I could mention a lot more, but for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and introduce you to Clive. So hi, Clive. I just want to thank you for being here today and taking the time out of your schedule to talk with me and share your experiences.
Thank you, Elise. That was a very good entry.
Did I get it all right?
Yes. And firstly, for the audience out there, I'd like to say how privileged it is to be involved with Post-Stroke and be president of the board and helping this platform go further ahead.
Thank you, Clive. And you all don't see what he does, but he is an integral part of our organization and making sure that we can keep doing what we're doing. So we're very lucky to have a chat with him today. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to learn about Clive's journey since his stroke, but we're also going to take a look at what it means to take back control of your life after you've had a stroke and finding sense of purpose again, because the strokes can take so much from you, and finding those things is difficult and it's a hard journey. And I feel like, Clive, you've really shown how to do that. And I know it hasn't been easy for you, but you continue to do so much for the survivor community, for pushing new research forward. So I kind of just want to start the conversation by asking you to share how long ago your stroke was and how it happened, if you feel comfortable sharing that.
Yep. So my stroke it'll be 10 years in November. My stroke, looking back now and realising it was the start of a stroke, was while I was driving on the freeway home from work. My right arm just felt different. I just thought it was being tired. So when I got home, I went to bed, had a snooze. Then when my now ex-wife came home, she was quite concerned that there was something going on, and being a typical middle-aged man, I was stubborn, didn't need any help. But here in Australia, we have a service called Nurse on Call. So you can ring the nurse and talk to a nurse. So that conversation was had between my wife and the nurse. Then I spoke to the nurse, and the nurse decided to call the ambulance on my behalf. The ambulance showed up. They weren't convinced that it was a stroke because I was still talking and walking, although my arm was sort of playing up. So they took me to hospital, and I was in emergency. It was late in the evening. I was in emergency all night. And then in the morning had a speech therapy test to check my swallowing and my speech so that I could have something to eat, and then moved me to the neuro ward. And that was really the start of my in-hospital stay of 8.5 weeks.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah. Not as long as some people and longer than others, but it was in November. So they said to me I wouldn't go home till mid-January. I told the consultant that I'd be going home for Christmas, and I did.
Yeah. Yes. Nothing if not determined.
Yes.
So, in those first few weeks and months and year, maybe that first year when you were back home, um, how did you find that your life changed? What was different?
So my life changed. So just before my stroke, I worked for myself. So that all went out the door. I think the biggest thing for me was no driving. So here in Australia, you have a mandatory 3 months of no driving. And where I live in Victoria, and there is a mandatory thing where you have to have an occupational therapy driving assessment before you're allowed back on the road. So that was the big thing. But then when it came to the time for that, I wasn't mentally prepared to get back on the road because of my limitations. We just started building a new house when I had this stroke, a double-story house. The consultant said, well, forget that idea because you'll never walk upstairs again. So that
Mm.
was one of my goals, which I achieved. I walk upstairs now, probably not the smoothest walk upstairs, but I can still do it. The biggest thing I think that came out of that was friends and people in my life. The people that I thought would step up and help didn't, and the people I didn't think would did. So it was really difficult to understand the people I thought were going to be there. So it was, and obviously I've made, in that 10 years, I made an awful lot of new friends that have come along through being a stroke survivor and also in research, being a
Hmm.
participant and being an investigator and just the wider community.
Yeah. It is odd how sometimes those traumatic events in our life show us like who the people who are actually there for you and how that can surprise you for for good and for bad. So I know you were working before. How did your work look after your stroke?
So one of the things I was told by the consultant was that no climbing ladders or steps. So as a tradie, that was no good. And also 10 years down the line, I still don't have a lot of function in my right arm. So being a tradie was nothing. I couldn't go back to doing that. So basically I haven't been back to work per se, as in paid employment. So I have, I suppose, made my life around doing what I do and helping others and trying to improve things in the health systems around the world. So it's about giving that lived perspective that the other people out there in daily life don't understand. So if you broke your leg, in theory, 8 to 10 weeks in cast, you're back to normal. With a stroke, there's no guarantees and no timeline.
Yes. And I think that that's so hard for people, not just stroke survivors, but the people who are around stroke survivors to understand, you know, their loved ones or caregivers or friends, family, that it's not something that has an end date or an end point, or that recovery has an end point. It's often ongoing. 100% recovery is never guaranteed. You know, if we're using that term to talk about like your pre-stroke self. And with that in mind, on that same note, thinking about how, you know, this changed your relationships with a lot of people, this changed, you know, your work. You're doing much different work now than you were doing before your stroke. How did that impact your mental health, your emotional health?
Um, my mental health took a dive. I'll be honest. sort of went down a rabbit hole that got reasonably dark. Thinking about psychology, like I saw a couple of psychologists that I didn't really gel with. And what people really need to know is if you don't gel with them, tell them and then go out and look for another one that you are going to gel with. They understand. I see a psychologist even today. I've been seeing the same one for 6 years. She's been amazing. Even through things like the COVID lockdown, she would ring me. We'd do telehealth. And in the end, we were still doing face-to-face when we shouldn't have been. So that's helped me a lot. And I guess having found a professor of OT that's given me some guidance and I'm going to say dragged me into my new life, but it's given me a new direction, which I think is something I needed. And I'll actually say that I do believe I'm in a better position now than I've been in a long time.
Yeah.
Which some people out there are going to find that hard to believe, but it's making the best of what you have. I know I can't go back to the work I was doing, so my life is aimed at sharing my story, being involved in things like post-stroke, speaking to allied health students in universities so they can get a better perspective of what stroke is. They learn from their lecturers, but there's parts of stroke that isn't really, it can't be taught. It's got to be a lived experience.
Yes, 100%. And I think well, first of all, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. It's not easy to talk about, when we have dark times in our mental health. I think your point of finding a therapist that you get along with that is a good fit for you is hugely important advice. That's something that I have dealt with my own therapy journey. I haven't had a stroke, but I have a history of anxiety and panic disorder. And so, I've had therapists in the past and I stayed with them for a little while because I felt bad, right? I didn't want to hurt their feelings or whatever, but it wasn't doing anything for me. And so I finally found a therapist who it really felt like was listening to me, that I connected with. And it makes a huge difference in your mental health and in your ability to trust that person to help you navigate life again and feel like you can get back to things again. So thank you for bringing that up because I think that's a hugely important piece. I think for a lot of people, survivors that I've worked with before, that I see in so many different online communities talk about, you do lose, there is a sense of grief sometimes because you do lose your sense of identity after you have a stroke, because you lose certain roles or occupations or, and this is all coming, of course, from my kind of lens as an occupational therapist too. That's kind of ingrained in me, but, you have changes to those things that are significant, or a loss of those things, which is hugely impactful. And climbing up out of, a deep mental health issue or struggling to see the light, seeing a therapist is good. Can you give some other advice or potentially some things that helped you to feel like you had some semblance of control over your life again?
Yes. And I'll just say out there that I think all allied health professionals have that level of understanding. Like if you spoke to my OT, my physio, the speechy, between them, they know everything that's going on. There's only really one person that knows everything, and that's the psychologist. But you end up building relationships with all of the allied health professions and you share different information with different people for different reasons. So it's sort of, it's about feeling comfortable sharing that information. And that's what you, when you build relationships, you see someone for a long time, that you do share information, and people, you find the people that are, compassionate enough to listen and actually take it in rather than. So here in Australia, we have an amazing public health system, and I I'm not sure what it's like in the private because I don't have private health insurance. So everything's been through the public system. There's a level in the public system of people that are compassionate about what they're doing, because it's certainly not about the money they're getting. So yeah, and having like acceptance, I suppose, is a big thing. Accepting what's happened, accepting that you're not going to go back to the way things were. Obviously, there's that small percentage of people that do recover and can return to their everyday life that they had before. But in reality, most people will have some sort of deficit left over from the stroke.
Hmm.
But they're in control of their destiny, I suppose it would be said. As I've spoken to you before, OTs, physios, you've got all the tools and help and advice for us. But unless we put the effort in, then nothing's going to change because you can't do it for us.
Right. And that's true for anything in life. You know, if we want to do something, we have to do it ourselves. I think too, though, for people who are listening to this who maybe are in the United States, who or in other countries where maybe they don't have a public health system, there is private insurance. Maybe they're only getting, I don't know, 2 weeks, 4 weeks of inpatient rehab, maybe a few weeks of outpatient rehab, and then they're discharged. You know, of course, those reasons are why I started post stroke, because I just felt like too many people, you know, were discharged and they were, you know, just where's the hope? Where's the hope that you can continue to make progress, you know? And ideally, a therapist would give you tools to keep going in your recovery at home. But that also doesn't always happen. So I guess for people who are in a situation like that, coming to a place of acceptance, or who are motivated to take back control. I think that's a lot of people who watch post strokes videos are people who are motivated. That's, they're searching out, they're looking for resources to either supplement, you know, maybe therapy they already have, or they don't have any at all. So what advice would you have for people in that position who maybe don't have access to continued therapy or other allied health professionals like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy?
Um, I'll first talk about here in Australia. Like, I think here in Australia, it's about your voice in public health. The louder you shout, the more you get listened to. So I stayed in community rehab for an excessive amount of time. I think because one, I had an amazing occupational therapist that was person centered, not money focused. And I advocated for myself. In the private sector, like in America, obviously you can't really advocate for yourself because the insurance companies are in control of the funding and the money. And I don't know what it's like around the world, but they don't treat stroke as the chronic illness that it really is. A lot of people still adhere to, they treat it as an acute thing that will eventually go away. And that's
Yes.
because the people controlling the money have no medical training or no medical background. So they just don't understand. And I guess with the insurance companies, it's about profits for the shareholders. At the end of the day, that's what they're about. So if you're in that position of having a home program and you can't have access to that therapy service, then it's having someone maybe in your life that can guide you and help you in that journey, or being self-motivated enough to do the therapy sessions. For me, I joined the gym. I'm lucky, I'm 10 years almost down the track and I still get OT and physio funded once a month. And I get an exercise physiologist every fortnight at the moment, and she comes to the gym where I'm a member so she can work with the equipment at the gym, not give me exercises to do and then I can't do them because I haven't got the equipment.
Yes, that's amazing. That's amazing.
And I think obviously it's the motivation, and people, I guess, need to understand that they're not alone in this journey. They might think they are. Everybody's stroke's different, but every stroke survivor can understand the things you might be going through. So it's a case of you reach out to different platforms post-stroke. We've got so many videos up there and content up there. And if you don't see the content you like, then email Elise and ask if she can create a video for whatever it is you think we're missing.
Absolutely. Leave a comment on this video. Let us know what you'd like to see. Yes. I do want to go back to something you said, though, because you are right. I think it is hard to advocate for yourself in any system. It's hard to shout when you're dealing with a lot of different things. But for people who may be in the United States or in a country where there is some type of private insurance, it can be a very hard system to navigate. Like if people are wanting to discharge, like if a therapist is wanting to discharge you, or the insurance is saying, oh, you've met your visits, or you're plateauing, right? That's my favorite one. I have lots of videos about that. Anyway, but there are things that are within your power so that you can try to continue to get therapy. And that's, I think, just having an open, honest conversation with your therapist, if you're in a place to do that, where you say, if they're saying, oh, well, I feel like you're plateauing, just like with asking for a new psychologist or mental health therapist, you can ask to see a different occupational or physical therapist. It's not going to hurt the therapist's feelings, because sometimes people just need kind of a change of scenery, right? We need to shake things up a little bit, and therapists get stuck in the way that they do things. I think that's just kind of human nature. And sometimes we get boxed in and we're like, oh, well, we've been doing this and now they're hitting a plateau. Well, we need to do something different, or we need to see a new therapist who is going to try something different, or a different method that maybe this other therapist isn't using. So advocating in that way for yourself, I think, can be helpful. Also, if you and your therapist both feel like, hey, the insurance should not be denying further visits, you can have your therapist write a letter of medical necessity, or like an appeal to the insurance company. It doesn't always work, but it's worth a try. So if you feel like there's still more to go, and your therapist still feels like that, but you're both just really bummed out because it's the insurance company who's trying to stop it, see if they can write that letter of appeal of medical necessity for the reasons why you need continued therapy. And they will know how to do that. They have been trained how to do that. We get trained how to do that in school. So I would just ask, because there's no harm in asking, you know?
The problem with the system is
the one problem.
no, the one problem, but
I'm just kidding.
from an insurance point of view, and I call them the bean counters who are about the money.
Yes.
They need to be thinking about the future, not the now, because if they continue with your therapy now, okay, it's an extra expense. But what cost saving is there in the long run? Are you going to be less relied on your insurance in later life? The same
Yeah.
with the public health system, and that here is when they discharge you, if they could continue on for just even a short while, then they may save thousands or hundreds of thousands in the long run.
Yes. And that's the thing. If you want to think about it from a purely financial standpoint, which unfortunately we have to do, we don't have to do, but we have to think about it that way because that's how companies operate, at least in the United States. Um, it it can also help to decrease hospital readmissions, where if somebody goes home too soon and they weren't ready, and then they have a fall and then they're back in the hospital. You know what I mean? It's like, why don't we give people what they need up front so they can get to a point of safety? I feel like so often it's just about, okay, how can we get people discharged and get the bed empty and get it filled again? But we have to think about those safety aspects. And anyway, keeping people out of the hospital, at home, safe, and as independent as people can be. Because you're right, at the end of the day, it's going to help reduce costs in the long run, and prevent people from getting hurt and just having to go back to the hospital.
And for me, the independence came back when I could return to driving, because then I was in control of my daily life.
Yeah.
So losing that was my biggest loss of independence, I feel. As much as I couldn't do a lot of things, not being able to just get up and go down the street for a coffee or take myself to a rehab appointment and relying on other people or taxis or was a really hard thing. And I think for a lot of people, asking for help is really hard.
Yeah.
But if you have a good supportive network around you, they understand that is difficult for you to ask, but the right people will be there to support you.
What advice would you give on helping someone get better at asking for help? Because I'm super guilty of that, not asking for help. You know that.
Yeah, and I am too.
It's, um, but I do feel like being able to ask for help can definitely help you take back some control over your life. Because when you can get more things done, if you do have help for certain things, it's like it can bring that sense of control back to you.
I'm probably not really the right person to ask about that because I even now still have a problem asking for help. I've got maybe 3 or 4 people in my life that I can reach out to that I know would help. No questions asked, but I still feel awkward about asking for help because I feel that I should be able to do it on my own because I always have.
Right.
So yeah, it's a hard one, and it's just about, I suppose, the comfort level you have with whoever it is that you're going to think about asking for help. For
Yeah.
me, I think about asking for help and then I sit back and I ponder and I work out how to do it on my own.
Sure.
And then the people that I was going to ask say to me, "Why didn't you ask for help?"
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so for me, I'd rather sit back and work out how to do it for the next 2 days and then do it myself than get help.
Well, so in that sense, it also helps you take back control.
Yeah.
So being stubborn can be helpful. Yeah. I
Yes,
love
being stubborn can be, yeah.
it. Can. It can to an extent, for
It can be
sure.
detrimental as well.
It can. As a stubborn person myself, it has its 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 benefits and its curses. So, um, I would love to talk a little bit, kind of switch gears just a little. We've definitely touched on taking back control, but I want to kind of shift gears to like talking about finding purpose again, because Clive, of all the people that I know, you are most certainly the busiest, the most involved. You have so much going on, so many things that you're involved in. And it feels like this has become like your new purpose, kind of your new life's mission, that you are doing all of these things and you are so heavily contributing to, I feel like, the way stroke rehab is going to be done in the future. By not only talking with students, you're influencing how they're going to practice. You're influencing stroke rehab research. You provide your experience and perspective, which is so valuable and so necessary as we move forward in how stroke rehab needs to be done. How did you find yourself getting involved in all of these? I know you mentioned the OT professor who kind of roped you into some of this stuff. Can you talk a little bit about how you started this journey to finding purpose again, um, and what that has looked like for you?
Yes. So when I was eventually discharged from rehab, from community rehab, I wasn't happy because I felt I was still making gains.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I went online. Honestly, I didn't know what I was looking for, and I just searched all sorts of things, and I found an intense upper limb trial where they were trialing Botox to see the effect on the wrist and the fingers. So I sent an email, and it was to a professor of OT. She made a phone call to me. We talked about what I thought I wanted to gain, and she felt that I fitted into this trial as a participant. So I went to the local acquired brain injury unit where the trial was being held. I met her, we discussed. I was taken on board for the 12-week program. During that 12 weeks, she said at the end that she wanted me to come and chair a committee for her because she liked me because I didn't shut up and I didn't stop asking questions. So the committee she wanted me to be involved in was a stakeholder committee at Monash University here in Melbourne, where it was the first of its kind. She wanted to bring in consumers or survivors of stroke, but also therapists and important people so they could work out what it is we want from research.
Yes.
So it was the first of its kind where the consumer really had a voice to tell, well, not to tell the researchers, but to discuss what was important to us and what may be lacking in the current systems. So I ended up chairing that committee for 4 years. From that, I moved from being a participant in research trials. She brought me on board as an investigator in another trial. From that, I ended up speaking at a conference with her about the work we were doing. I met many, many other researchers along the way, and I've been involved in many, many research projects as an investigator. I've been in some co-design of research before it even goes to the grant proposals. Currently, I'm working on a project that's being run by this particular professor about bringing the care in the subacute area up to the current standard, because currently over here, from white paper to practice is about 15 years. So
Yeah.
they write a white paper, they'll say that X is going to be beneficial, but it takes that long to go down the track.
Yes.
So we've engaged many hospitals on the eastern seaboard in Australia, and they're going through a education process with people on site in the hospitals. I chair the consumer advisory group where we see and monitor all the communications and paperwork that's going out to the potential consumers in the hospitals about what's going on. I'm currently part of a grant proposal for a new technology for the wrist and the fingers that's coming out of India. Yeah, I work with a exercise physiologist. We've done a HIT program for stroke survivors. We're looking at doing a program in exercise physiology about fatigue and how to manage fatigue while you're exercising.
Yes.
So she's moved from Sydney to Canada. So luckily for me, I'm now working with a university in Canada as well.
Well, let's add that. I didn't mention that one. Yes. I feel like that study on managing fatigue during exercise is going to be huge.
Yeah. So having met this professor of OT, and she, I quite often say when I'm out places, she dragged me into this, but she asked me to be part of something. I didn't know whether it was the right thing or not, but I gave it a go, and it gelled with how I felt, and because it was a new concept here about
Yeah.
getting the lived experience voice. Now, when you do a grant proposal for a stroke research, unless you have that lived experience person on the investigator list, you don't even get a look in.
Right.
So things have advanced quite well, possibly in the last 5 to 6 years, more than
Yeah.
anything, even to the point where now when they have their annual stroke conferences, there's a proportion of lived experience people at those stroke conferences.
Yes.
And only yesterday I was at the National Stroke Improvement Workshop here in Melbourne. There was only, I think there was 3 lived experience people there. I was part of a panel of discussion.
Yes.
So the important people in the research space are listening to the lived experience.
Yes. Which is so necessary because it's going to shape the way that we do stroke rehab in the future, and we need those voices to do that effectively. Um, Truly. Well, we'll go ahead and start wrapping up. I think my last question that I think our audience might be interested in is, you have definitely found this sense of purpose in research, in sitting on panels. You have just gone 500% into this. Whether you were dragged or went willingly is up for debate. But no, I'm just kidding. Um, but this has really turned into something special, and you are really contributing in huge ways that will continue to um, people years and decades and centuries down the line are going to be impacted by the work that you're doing. For people who maybe are not quite ready to throw themselves 500% into something or sit on, 5 different panels or things like that, what are some first baby steps that maybe they could do to start finding and pursuing that sense of purpose again?
Um, I guess advocating for yourself is really the start of you expressing how you're feeling about what's going on. There are lots of websites, there are lots of Facebook groups, lots of different people doing lots of different things. It's not necessarily everything is good. You need to be careful what you do and don't do. There's also, I think, a lot of people out there that are not qualified to be talking about what they're talking about. But yeah, being an advocate for yourself is the start of your, if you want it, and it's all about where you want to end up. Do you want to be returning to work or not working, or do you have an ambition to be able to speak to a group of students about your experiences? It all depends on where you want to end up going. I didn't think it was anything for me. I'm a tradie by background. I've never been to uni, and now here I am standing in university in front of a class of students, speaking about my experiences and talking to them about their journey in their careers. It's just, for me, it's phenomenal as to where I've ended up. I would never have ever dreamed of being in this position after having such a traumatic event in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Clive, thank you so much. We have conversations like this all the time. We just figured that maybe we would actually record one. So thank you so much for taking the time and being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with me and with Post-Stroke's audience, everybody who's watching. I sincerely appreciate it because I know it's not always easy to be open and talk about, some of those harder things in our past, for sure.
I always tell the audience I'm talking to that, like with students, I say to them, there's nothing off the table about my stroke, because I don't feel that if I'm going to talk about it, I need to be as open and honest as I can be, because you don't like to be able to say to them, I can talk about anything you like, but don't talk about that, because that's not right. I need to be open with everybody about whatever's happened during the journey.
Well, it's a hard thing to do. And I know that didn't also happen overnight, like being able to be vulnerable and share those experiences. So I appreciate you opening yourself up and sharing that to potentially thousands of people. So thank you. Please make sure to support the channel however you can. Leave this video a like, subscribe to the channel, become a channel member by clicking the join button, or leave us a super thanks by clicking it down in the YouTube bar below. And please, please, please leave me a comment if you would like to see more chats like this with Clive or with others, and I'd be really happy to hear your feedback. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time.